a lot of men don't actually spend time exploring what life was like for them when they were younger. We can call it inner child or we can call it our inner self, but a lot of men ignore that and move forward in their future and try to just get on with it based on what society and other people tell them. On today's show, we're going to be looking at our inner selves and we're going to try and figure out how we can connect. Hi, this is Joey Buzzatall and welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. In today's show, we're going to Milwaukee, everyone, and we're going to be speaking to a special guest who's written an amazing book on inner self, and he's going to talk about his book and talk about the journey of going internally to connect with your inner self. So let's welcome to the show, Paul Martino. Paul, how are you?
Great. How are you, Joe?
I'm good, Milwaukee. I spoke to you beforehand. I do get a little bit excited. Like in my head now, I've got the Happy Days song playing.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably is something you hear about all the time. I bet.
We do. We do. But it's okay. It's a great connection to make for people.
Is Milwaukee still the place where they make lots of beer?
Oh, lots of beer, brats, and cheese.
Yeah, because that's what I've heard, that there's lots of beer, and so there must be different brands and different tastes and so on.
Yeah, quite a bit of microbrews and craft brewing, and of course, there's the big ones that started here. Miller is still here.
Yeah.
Vestiges of Pabst are still here.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are quite a few beers.
This is what I like about doing this podcast, is you get to meet interesting people and you hear about things that you may not necessarily, hear about or read about. So, and welcome to the show. Before we start, do you want to just give the audience a bit of an overview of you, like what you do?
Sure.
And so on.
Sure. So I am a professor at a small liberal arts college in Kenosha, which is about 40 minutes south of Milwaukee, about an hour north of Chicago, and in the biology department. And I teach anatomy and physiology courses, but I'm also a dean. So that's a relatively new position. And I do research and I teach, and been in the research academic game for about 25 years now. So I love my students. That they were one of the inspirations for this book. And
right. Okay.
We started with young men. Actually, were the original inspiration, at least for me.
Yeah. I mean, like, you're the very first dean that I've had on the show, so I feel excited about that too. So I really resonated with the title because I'm a therapist and I love doing inner child sort of work with men. So do you want to just tell us about, I guess, how it came? I mean, you just mentioned in your intro the men, but how did it come about for you? And was there a personal experience for you to actually go into your own inner younger self and connect with your younger self?
Yeah, it was what I was seeing, and my colleagues and I were seeing the same thing with our male students seem to be more and more lost over the last 13 years, and progressively more and more so, where the females seem to be excelling. They have a different set of issues, but the male age college students between 18 and 22 seem to have lost their way.
Right.
They seem a lot more confused. So then the pandemic hit. And my colleagues and I were looking to stay productive, and we wanted to do some self-work. And, we had lots of time. So we decided, Nate, myself, and Justin decided, well, why don't we write a book and think about helping? Nate's a chiropractor, so he's a practitioner. And then Justin is also a professor, and we thought, well, why can't we write a book with the idea of helping our students and our patients? My idea was, it's the young men that need us most, but it ultimately ended up being a book, I think, that anybody can take some kind of message away from.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I know lots of books that are titled Letters To, but I've never seen one about for men. I mean, I know you can actually apply it to anyone, like you were saying, but a friend of mine did letters from to your grandma, right? So it's all these different people. But when you were speaking there, what did you notice? Can you maybe highlight some of the things that you noticed that the men were doing or have been doing?
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be unwilling to fail. Scared of failure. They seem to be easily rattled. They seem to be more anxious. We've seen more signs of depression.
Mm.
We've seen signs of, sort of them trying to do more than they should in some ways. There's a letter that I wrote that's called "Living Within Your Means," and less happiness or contentment. So we talk about contentment versus happiness, and so they just seem to not be thriving.
Yeah.
Right, in a way, like they had needed more mentorship, and they're less likely to reach out. So we thought, well, maybe we could write a book, and that would be less intimidating for them. And a short book, right? So the book, the chapters, the letters are short. They're easy to read. Hopefully they're somewhat entertaining, and we tell stories about ourselves.
But I think that's really good. I mean, you're right. Like, men are more derivative to shame, and women are more derivative to emotional, unease and rest. And so, where do you think or what do you think is the cause for them to not have those tools? I had a few other guests on the show recently, and we were talking about the changes in parenting as we've the last few decades. Like when we started to do the helicoptering, and in Australia, I don't know if it happens in America, but we had this period where every single person, every kid, no one lost, everyone won something.
That's
and
right.
Yeah, and so then when they went into the world, they all had anxiety because they didn't know what to do when things happened. Is that what you've noticed?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And then I don't know if in Australia you call it, but we've gone from helicopter parenting to bulldozer parenting,
right,
where they actually physically move all obstacles out of the child's way.
Right.
And that's exactly it. And so they don't know how to lose. They're afraid to lose. And failure, we write a letter on failure. And that is key. You have to fail in order to succeed because you learn from those failures.
Yeah.
So I think they're not used to failing, and because they're afraid of failing, it's hard for them to succeed because they think that that there's this straight line, right, with a slope of 1, and everything just happens correctly the first time.
I mean, I've got my own theory. I don't know. I'd be curious to know what you think. I do feel that there was a major change and shift once social media started. Because, when I'm listening to you, there seems to be more emphasis on good, right? And so when you don't get good and you consider it bad or failing, and they don't want that. So no one's really exploring the lessons, right, for example. Or the things that you can gain. And also, I'm sure you've heard of that documentary, The Masks That We Live In. Have you heard of that one? Yeah. Like in there, it does talk a lot about role models, like, and it sort of mentions a scene that I didn't want to believe, but then I saw it with my own eyes and I went, oh, it's when a boy, right, as a little toddler, cries for the first time and they're told to not cry. And so do you feel that the change has to come from like, where does the change start? From the parents or from society or
both? I mean, I think it starts in the home, right? With the parents and then everybody taking care of their own house, and then that then makes the societal level change that's needed. But it has to start with parenting and not knowing that risk and failure are normal, and then and there
needs to be vulnerability, doesn't there? We need to be vulnerable.
Of course, you have to be vulnerable. Absolutely. And that's okay to cry, and it's okay to fail. That's the only way to grow. Is to work your way through that. And if we don't go through those phases, right, in our homes with our parents and our friends and the rest of our family, then we don't know how to act when we become adults.
Yeah.
And that's what we noticed, right? They just don't seem to know how to act as adults. They seem to be further behind than they should be.
Yeah. Look, I mean, your experience and your book, have you noticed how have you noticed the acceptance of the information? Like, have people been gravitating towards, have men been coming towards you and gravitating, or because I really do think it's a big change, isn't it, to get everyone to start this new dialogue. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. So what have you noticed feedback, or what have you noticed people doing?
So the feedback has been fantastic. I will tell you that both from males and females, we initially thought, well, writing it for younger people, but we've gotten fantastic feedback from people older than myself. And so, but it's strange that you asked that, because some of our former students who bought it, so when we published the book, we let everybody know that we kept in contact with, specifically the males, love the book. And I think part of that is because we try to use humor, at least Justin and I do. Nate's a little bit more, cerebral than the two of us, but we consider ourselves regular guys that have done a lot with what we've been given. And we tell a lot of funny stories about ourselves. And we say in the intro of the book, is we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take what we do very seriously. So, I mean, it's a nice balance. And I think for the young men to see older, successful men be vulnerable and to not be perfect, right? And to admit we have mistakes and to show emotion, I think that's important. So the feedback has been outstanding.
Yeah. I like the way that you said that you don't take it, you have some fun, but you take what you do seriously, because I think that's another one of the problems, is that there is, I remember when I was, say, in my early 20s, there wasn't the same pressure to have property and to have a good job to the level of wealth that, we didn't have. We had a few, famous people, but now everyone wants to be famous. So what about you? I'm curious to know a little bit about you and what you discovered with your younger self. What did you discover? And what do you feel like you wrote to your younger self? What was, you'd have to go into details, but what was one of the themes that you spoke about, you think?
So I think as I thought deeply about, what would I have told myself as a mentor? Because I felt like when I was younger that I needed more mentorship. And I kind of felt sorry for myself when I was younger.
Is that like, so did you not feel like you had a mentor in your dad?
Yeah, well, I did, but my parents are both immigrants. They were both born in Italy, and they came to America. So my section of the book takes a look at the perspective of the child of immigrant parents, right?
Yeah.
He's a great man. He's still alive, and but I always felt like I needed somebody else to sort of guide me more professionally,
right?
And so I've always been seeking that. And I thought, wow, why couldn't I give this advice to myself? So it was, and I realized how lucky I really am. And for all of the struggles that I've gone through, I have not become who I am in spite of the struggles. It's because of the struggles.
Yes.
And so it's all been a gift. And that's what I realized. It's all been a gift. My parents were a gift. I would not change a thing. Yeah. There's nothing I would go back, good and bad. Because if I had not experienced all of the downside, if I had not had the opportunity to go and to try to discover who I am, who I was, who I could become, I don't think it would have all worked out the way it did. It took a long time, but I'm not that old, so it didn't take as long as I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to you, because I'm also a child of immigrant parents. Secondly, I also I sort of realized that it did take a long time, meaning that I wish I was freaking 20 and I know what I know now. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And the other thing that I guess I'm going to ask you this, because you mentioned the immigrant stuff, is that I found it really hard, because my parents didn't understand my desire to go seeking, because I was the same as you. So I sort of felt like I was being pulled back, like yes. I wanted to go to university. My dad said, why? Come and do labouring, right? And that blew my head away. Or I wanted to go and see plays and theatre, and they just didn't understand. And so there was this feeling of being inadequate when I was a teenager, or being different. Now I understand that was special. For our listeners, what would you suggest if they are receiving some pushback from people around them? Because sometimes when people don't understand, they're going to put it down, aren't they?
Yeah, they will. And I think you just have to be patient with them too, because I mean, I had the exact same experience with my parents, sort of wanting to hold me back from lots of things, and it was out of love, right? The intention was always good. So I think,
but also could be out of fear.
It could, right? It's fear. It is fear,
Yeah.
and then it took a while, but I think it's something you have to go through with them, and you have to be patient and explain to them. That's what I did, right? It took some time, but eventually they realized that they needed me. They needed to let me explore the things I needed to explore, and then I moved away, and I moved away.
I was going to say I moved away too. I think that's the only thing you can do, isn't it?
Yes, that ultimately was what made the change happen. I finally said, I did it your way for 4 years, and that was for college, and then I need to go, and I need to explore who I am. I need to fail on my own. And they finally understood. It took them a while. So I think my advice would be to your listeners that you need to be patient, right? And I think that's another thing that I realized is how, I mean, in the United States, how impatient we are. We just want everything now.
It's everyone, because I love that. I'm so glad you said that, because that is one of my biggest mantras, and one of my biggest passions is I want to try and get people to explain that we brush our teeth every day, right? So what if we did that to our mental health? Yes. Right? What if every day we connected with our younger self? That would be so. I hope, because that would be so much easier than having to deal with things reactively. Being proactive. So, in regards to connecting with your younger self, what is the aim? What are you telling the audience or readers of your book? What's the benefit of that?
Yeah, so we actually outline, there's a section at the beginning of the book on how to use the book, right? And so we talk about growth through struggle. Struggling is good. And we have to be in the moment and let that happen, because it's happening for a reason. And if you don't address that struggle, then the struggle keeps coming back over and over in different forms. And it's not until you deal with that. So it's growth through struggle. We talk about ordinary experiences. I mean, you can learn from ordinary experiences, right? Vacation, and you don't have to go, to an amazing place or win an award. So we talk about ordinary things, helpful advice that's applicable, right? Learn to laugh at yourself. I mean, Justin and I laugh. We work together, so I mean, we laugh at each other and with one another every day. And we have our students, because we still do research, right? So see us fail. And show them that that's normal, right? Like, we struggle too. Oftentimes our students can do things technologically that we cannot, and that we're okay with that. And then they see it and they're like, but you have a PhD. I have a PhD, but that doesn't mean I know everything. It just means I know a lot about something. Yeah. And I struggled, right? And so they see that, and they always sort of turn their head and look at you like, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? I thought you knew how to do everything.
Yeah. And so that's sort of that's the comparison thing, isn't it? I mean, men compare themselves a lot more than women do.
Yes.
Because there's this unexpected role of being the provider, being strong, being masculine, being all those things. You said, can you just read what was the second one again? Something about materialistic things. We want more. Is that what you said?
I said ordinary experiences, but materialistic things. I mean, that's in actually one of the letters to talk about, living within your means, and that's, I address that issue in there, because you can be happy and you don't need a lot of stuff. Yeah, or expensive stuff.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because what I've been through a bit of trauma lately. Just mum passed away, and
I'm sorry to hear.
Thank you. But all of those things, though, like you said, everything comes with a gift. So what I've learned through those experiences the last 2 years, especially then COVID, is when you go inside and you really do the work, including the younger self, you don't need anything. I feel like I don't need anything now. I don't even care about, I mean, of course we need money to live, but I've realized that in the past, I used to buy all these things that I didn't really need. And then I remember there were times when I'd have things in the cupboard I've never opened. I'm going, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So do you think that doing work with your younger self is really about connecting and loving yourself? It's about really loving yourself,
It
you know?
is.
Yeah. So
It
do
is
you... go on, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go on.
It is. I mean, because, you know, we see our younger selves as this ignorant, you know, young, foolish. And to some degree that's true. But there's also a lot of wisdom there as I look back at some of the things I went through, you know, because you do this introspection as you're writing this. And you realize, you know, there are definitely moments of grace, and then there's moments of where you're not so ignorant or foolish, right? And so there's something you can learn from everyone, including your younger self.
Yeah. Is like, what happens if someone has had trauma in their childhood? And I'm only saying this to you because I guess a lot of my clients that have had trauma, because I do hypnotherapy as well, so I do a lot of inner child work. They don't want to go there. They like, I say to them, okay, let's do some younger self stuff, and they really get defensive about the fear, and you know, we have to work through that, and we eventually get there. But you know, what do you tell people? Is there anything in your book about dealing with, I'd say, a fractured inner child?
So Nate, I wish Nate was here. So his entire section, you know, he has multiple chapters on this because I mean, I think we've all gone through that, but Nate's sections of the book really deal with that and going through depression and how he came out of that.
Was he abused? Was he, or was he?
No, he wasn't abused. I think he's raised, and his father's an optometrist, a very successful family, and I think a lot of it had to do with pressures of just being successful as a young man. Now he's his wonderful family. He's a wonderful person, but I mean, it happens to all of us. And so he went through this really tough time, and he was actually a student of mine. So Nate was a former student, which is kind of funny. And he was going through this time, you know, when he was a student of mine, and I didn't even know it because he's one of the happiest, most gracious, giving human beings I've ever met. And so he talks about that a lot. I think it's about finding purpose, that there's purpose. So he's got a chapter on reason versus purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
And the way that you just describe, I mean, like, again, you're highlighting all these really important things, is that you didn't, you know, he's the most happiest person, but it just shows you how good we are at putting masks on. Like, it's interesting, like, how a little thing can cause so much. Like, I remember when I became an adult, I didn't understand why I couldn't work with men, right? It was always this conflict with fear. And so I would always look for jobs that had a female boss. And then I would then try to navigate moving. And of course it was hard because in most cases it was male bosses. And then one day I got an offer for a job at an engineering company, and it was all males. And so I ran to my therapist and we did some of this work. And all that happened was, when I was 4 years old, I walked into the garage and I said to my dad, hi. And he said, and he was with friends and he was playing with his car, and they all said, get out of here, you don't belong. That's all that they said. And so when I was able to then heal that inner child and let the younger self me know that my dad was actually protecting me, he wasn't abusing me, it was the most amazing feeling to not have that fear anymore. You know, so do you feel that everyone has some form of experience of release or healing when they do this work?
Yes. No, absolutely. You have to deal with it. You just have to. You have to go back and you have to understand how you got to where you're at. And if you don't, I had to do the same thing. I mean, you know, we could go on and on about, you know, but it's true. And we've all had it. And I've heard it said that most people, by the time you're 30, most people have had some kind of traumatic experience in their life. And so that's probably true.
Yeah.
And I've worked through some of that too.
Going back to what you were saying about the helicoptering and all that, right? A lot of people think, and I think we need to highlight this, a lot of people think that the trauma that we talk about and that you're mentioning is something bad. But we now also have, say, for example, two parents working, and so children now are being abandoned, or they feel they were being abandoned by going to daycare, and that in itself is a trauma. So some people have the best families, but they still have trauma because of events. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that people knew that while they were listening.
Yeah. And it's relative, right? I mean, it's relative. What's traumatic for, I mean, human beings we're very much similar in many, many ways, in most ways, but we're all very different too. And our points of reference are different. So, even though something may not seem traumatic to you or me, that doesn't mean it's not traumatic to somebody else, right? It's points of reference. And so I think you're right. And so you have to come to grips with, and be open to the fact that, something that doesn't seem traumatic to you, it can be traumatic to somebody else, and you have to be sensitive to that. And so
yes,
I think
exactly.
that's important, especially for men.
Yeah, especially for men. So when you, what do you feel is there a common factor that the inner child is seeking, or the younger self is seeking? Like, do you feel like I'm sure there's multiple things that, but do you feel like there may be something that's quite common with everyone?
I think it's acceptance and mentorship. I was looking for a mentor. I wanted to. My father's a great person. I loved him, and he took care of us. But he worked quite a bit. It was a different kind of parenting style. We never sat and talked deeply. We do now, right? We do now, but we didn't then. And I was looking for someone that I could talk to about men's issues, and I didn't realize this at the time, that I felt like someone was listening to me and could guide me and say, no, that's normal, right? That's okay. There's nothing abnormal about the way you're feeling. And it was just something I couldn't do with my dad. Again, it was just wasn't a thing, part of his personality.
Well, I think that's common. So what did you learn about your dad by doing that, by realizing this process? Because I think that your dad is my dad. You know that, right? We've got identical dads. So what? And when I did it, because I didn't want to. I think I didn't want to realize anything about my dad because I was in that stage of anger until I then started to go deeper, and then I realized. What did you realize?
Well, I realized that he's a good man, and he was doing the best he could with the skills and the tools and the resources he had to be a good dad. And he was more worried about us having a roof over our head and being able to eat and paying the bills. And so he didn't have the time because he would work. He had a blue collar job, work 9 months out of the year. He looked like a coal miner when he'd get home. He'd work 12, 16, 17-hour days.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Really tired. Yeah, and he did the same thing on the weekends. And so, I mean, imagine doing that.
Now.
He came to the United States when he was 18 years old, and he stopped working when he was 75.
Yeah.
So even after my brother and I had left, and my mother had passed away, he continued to work. That was his sort of solace. That's where he was.
It was such a different, I can't even imagine men doing that now. I mean, I'm sure we do. There are some, but I think it was very there was a structure back then, wasn't it? Everyone sort of followed everyone, So say if someone, this is the hypothetical as a way to get the word out. Say if someone does your work and reads the book, what would be a way to try and encourage others to do it? Because I'm sort of just going to a headspace that I'm trying to always look at ways to make people, to make guys want to do it. Because I have experienced a lot of blockages. Men will always block. I think as time progresses, it gets easier. Yeah. And you're right what you said earlier. COVID has been a blessing in a way because it's made a lot of people think. So what would be a way for us to lure people to, you said something earlier about time. It's time, right? How do we speak to them or convince them that this is the most important thing they'll ever do in their life?
I would say you wanted a mentor when you were young. Be the person you wanted when you were young. And you can do that by writing to yourself, right? And no one ever has to see it. And because no one has to see it, you're the only one that will ever know. And I think that can free you, right? Because you can say things to yourself that you wouldn't say to somebody else because there's nobody there to answer you, right? You're literally writing it to yourself in the past, but really in the present. So I think just be the person that you wanted somebody else to be for you. And it is an obligation, right, to give back and give back to yourself. And so that's kind of the way we did it. That's the way I did it. And it was very cathartic, and I learned a lot.
Did you discover, like, I remember when I was doing it, I didn't think, there were certain things that came up that I did not think about. It just came out while I was writing. You know, and I'm going, oh my God, I didn't think this was a problem. And then it was just out, and I'm like crying and I'm writing. So it is quite cathartic, because a lot of people probably think it's, you know, the things that they may remember at a surface level. And then as you start it, you start getting into this, like you start to notice your body becomes a little bit like a boy, doesn't it? And they release and do stuff. I wanted to get your advice on something, because I was told by my grandpa, right, at a very young age, he said, Joe, if I can give you some advice, he goes, don't ever lose your innocence. Always be a bit innocent. And so I've maintained that, which makes me a little bit goofy and a little bit childish. Yes. But I don't think I want to let go of that. I think I like that. What do you think?
I think you should. And we do it all the time. Justin and I are prime examples. We're goofy. I'm still goofy with my kids, with friends. I think that that's a balance. And I'm a physiologist, right? I'm all about homeostatic balance. And so I think that is healthy to be, that part of you comes out. It is, you can, if you, anytime you repress part of your true personality, something bad is going to happen. Allow that to come out and be who you are, right? And if you're goofy, I'm goofy too. And I do it with my students.
I don't know how you did it. So this is a good conversation. I struggled at first, because I struggled with I got lots of comments about masculinity, grow up, you can't, you know, I got people telling me, like older friends who were supposed to be mentors were saying, look, you need to like not be goofy. And then once I discovered the acceptance that you were talking about, I just didn't care about anyone anymore.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't care. Whatever you want. And so I always think to myself, the success that I've achieved speaks for itself. So say what you want, but you know, I may be goofy, but here's the things I've done as a goofball. So maybe there's something to this, right? Yeah. So I try to let the success speak for itself, right?
And you can apply it. You can apply it to like other things that you mentioned. Say the goofiness could represent the desire to not go into major debt and have mortgages, right? Because I know that there's a lot of pressure. Or the goofiness could be compared to not being a guy that has lots of partners, right? And being romantic. I think that you're right. Like a lot of men are scared just to be themselves and say, hey, guess what? I'm a real romantic guy and I'm this, I'm that. And they try and fit in. And I think once we learn not to fit in, that we are okay, you know, that's going to be good. So I do hope. Why do you think women do it better than men? Why women seem to just do it so much easier? I know they have problems, but I think it's because. Do you think it's because they can sit around and talk about their emotions?
Yes. Yeah.
And we need to have a drink to do that.
That's right. All right. We have to be doing, and I think what I've seen over the last 20 years is that the way that men do that was this, you know, in these groups of doing activities together, and during the activities you sort of the mask comes off and you can kind of talk about it as a side, you know, there's sort of side conversations.
You're doing a bit like sport and all that.
Right. You're having that, you know, you have a beer afterwards and you can chat, but a lot of that type of socialization, at least from where I'm at, I don't see that much anymore. And because we're losing that. You know, these places where men can get to, because I think it's important for women to get together with women and men to get together with men and then obviously get together with each other. But I feel like at least where I'm at, what I have seen, the people I know, that there's less of that male bonding going on. It was already difficult before, right? When things were social. And now there's even less of that. And men just aren't as good at it.
I've got a bit of a theory on that. Like we could talk about this forever, but I do feel that men are breaking, which we need to. But I do feel like that break came about with the introduction of Me Too, because I know a lot of men that are scared of women now, right? So once upon a time, remember we in the 80s, think about the 80s and the 70s, how in how many things were so improper, right? And we would I cringe looking at them, and the movies I'd go to. And so now no one really, men don't know where they belong at this stage, and that's
correct.
We have to talk about, like, you know, it's sort of like we have to pull other men up when they're being rude, when they're being sexist, or you know, all that stuff. Because I guess you must see a lot of it in college, working in a college, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, some of it, young men, and it's out of ignorance, and so you can kind of, you know, I've had conversations, and that's the nice thing about, you know, being a teacher or professor, is that I get to have one-on-one conversations with young men and young women, and we talk about life, and that actually is the favorite part of my job. Is we talk about life, and you know, you get to know them, and they feel comfortable with you, and especially the men, but the women are good at it too, but they feel like they can open up and then ask you questions in a way that they might not be able to. But that takes,
with their dad,
that's where the goofiness comes in, right?
Yeah, well, the goofiness is what makes you relevant. I agree with you. I'm goofy and naive and silly, and that's what allows me to talk openly to people that age. Well, other men my age, they just don't relate, and so I think the goofiness is an advantage.
It is, and you become less formidable in their eyes and more human.
Yeah,
and so they're more willing to say, hey, you know, Martino, could I sit down with you? Can we chat about something? I said, sure, come on in. You know.
I'm surprised, because I would have thought. I see, this is good having this conversation, because part of me sometimes doesn't understand the way that they see the world, you know, because everything is quicker.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that there are certain people, especially men at that age, who do want to change and who do want things, right? Because there's also the other side where there's a lot of people pulling away.
Yes, it's both, and we see the anxiety and the depression side of it too, and you know, I think it's because they don't know what is expected of them. They don't have these social groups, because, you know, social media has made them go into this virtual world, and they don't know how to react outside of it. And so all of these connections. So you see both, right? I definitely see both, but I notice the anxiety and the depression more and more, and so I try to be there for them.
Yeah,
and just
so you're saying that you're noticing in colleges, or where you work, that they're spending more time behind a computer or a phone.
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
Oh really?
Oh for sure. Oh yeah. I mean, it's at, you know, catastrophic levels. I mean, their ability to talk to you diminishing, just in the last 13 years. And the last 5 being the worst, where they're sort of, you know, recessing into this world. That's the first thing they go to. I mean, if you're having a conversation with them, and I've got to go check my computer screen to check something for a class, they immediately jump on a phone, like, of course, like that, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, but we're also a bit guilty of that, aren't we?
Yes, agreed. No, I think it's affected everyone, and so. But the difference, I think, is that at least for me, I'm of the age where
we know different. None of this
it didn't existed, right?
Yes,
it didn't exist,
and we loved it.
And we loved it. And so going back, I always, you know, joke with my wife. I say, you know, if we were to lose everything and the internet were to go away, I think I'd be fine.
Yeah.
Because
what you're really saying is that you're able to turn it off.
Yeah.
Because what I've noticed with my clients who are younger, when I say, can you turn your phone off for the session, 1 hour, and they get anxiety over that 1 hour, I say the phone will be there after. I want to ask a question that, and please don't think I'm being rude, I'm just curious.
Sure.
Do you feel that are they entitled? Do they feel entitled? Versus, you know, I remember I got a job at 13, right? Dad said to me, do you want to go to private school? You got to pay for it yourself. And I look at my nephew and nieces, and there's no one in the world that they would do what I did. So there's like this entitlement. Like, I would never imagine just saying, can I have a PlayStation and get one?
Yeah. No, there is definitely more of that. I think there is. And I grew up much like you, you know, I remember wanting to go to the store to get a Slurpee or a slushie, you know, ice cone. And I must have been like 10 years old, and I went up to my dad, who was digging a hole by hand with a shovel. Yeah. And I said, Dad, I need some money to go to the store and get a slushie. He said, go get a job. And so I
What? And you were 10.
and so I went with my friends, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's going to work out. He told me to go get a job, and they're like, all right, well, we can take a walk. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, so I think there's some of that, but I think it goes back to the end of the helicopter parenting.
It's the
And
parents, isn't it?
it does come down to the parent.
Yeah.
I mean, have you read Greg Lukianoff's and Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind?
No,
It's a great
I've
book.
done a lot. See, I've done a lot of research in Japanese culture. Have you heard about that?
No.
So in Japan, it is a bit extreme, but everyone, male and female, when they turn 6, everyone gets given money, and their job is to go and get dinner on their own, right? And so that represents the beginning of independence. So you have these major, I mean, they're followed, but you've got these major Japanese roads, these little kids excited to go to the noodle shop. And then you have breakdowns, the kids that cry and can't do it. And then you have the conquest of these kids coming with baskets, right? Bags full of noodles. And apparently what I was reading is that the ones that succeed, their life totally changes. They don't feel like there's any obstacles in their life, versus the ones that have struggled and they go back home. Studies have shown that they've struggled as they get older because they still have that belief that they failed. So their parents and the teachers and all that tried and changed that through, their journey. And I also, there's that woman from New York as well that didn't she send her 7 or 8-year-old child on the subway on their own? I personally, I'm not, any listeners that think I'm being, this is just my opinion. I think that independence, like me getting a job at 13, was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And I don't know why parents don't do that more often now.
Yeah, I think we need to treat young people like young, competent people.
Exactly.
We'll give them and if we treat them like we're afraid that somebody's going to take them away and they're really, really vulnerable, then they're going to act that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so they'll be scared. You transfer fear. I think a parent, a loved one an older family member can transfer that fear to, a child, a niece, or a nephew. And so by saying you could go out, I mean, my father let me go to the store, which was far away. I mean, he didn't say I couldn't go. He just said he wasn't going to give me any money.
Yeah, and I guess we had our bikes, and also we'd wake up at at sunrise, and we'd go to bed at sunset. But the thing is, I just realized when you were saying that is that they haven't really experienced any permissiveness. The younger generations. Right. It'd be interesting to see how they grow up and then do this book, won't it? It'd be interesting to see what they want to do. They want out of their younger self versus say what we wanted, because we probably wanted freedom, or they probably want structure.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
or like the mentoring thing that you're talking about.
They like structure. They definitely don't like one of the classes I teach, or the way I used to teach. It was very unstructured, and it didn't take very long for me to figure out. Oh, they don't like the freedom. I want to give them freedom.
No,
they don't actually want it.
I think most kids. I read somewhere recently, most kids in this generation want to be told, but because they've got so much freedom, no one's telling them anything. And then also your point about everyone's going insular, that means that they're getting less access to those mentors, because they do have mentors, but unfortunately the mentors are social media apps. And they're getting the wrong information.
Right. And mentorship, I mean, if you look at the way that we train, residents in medicine, it's a series of controlled mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's what growing up should be, a series of controlled mistakes. But the optimal word there is mistakes, right? You have to make the mistakes.
Or lessons, yeah.
The lessons.
Yeah. Paul, thank you so much. I'm so sorry that we went over, but I want to ask you more questions, because I think the psychology of it all is really good. Where can people get your book? Is it available on Amazon?
Either on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble. There's a Kindle version and there's a paperback version. And then you can also we have a Facebook page. It's also titled Letters to Our Younger Selves. And we just started doing some audio-only podcasts talking about the different chapters of the book. So if somebody isn't sure if they want to buy the book, they kind of want to check out and hear what we're talking about, just go to the Facebook page, become a member and listen to what we have to say.
So everyone, the links will be linked below. I would really encourage everyone to buy this book. It's the most revolutionary thing that anyone can do. So Paul, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll connect again. And
yes.
I'm going to buy the book. So thanks for the introduction to it.
Thank you.
Okay, you've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast. So don't forget the new podcast is out on Monday. So Paul's podcast will be on Monday. And on Thursday, we have the retro podcast. So we've had lots and lots of podcasts now. So just get an opportunity to listen to some of the old interviews that we've had. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Until next time, guys, have a great week. See you later. Bye.